There is, of course, a certain emphatic exaggeration when I'm saying that the brain is alien to symbolic psychemy SPM. The brain and the SPM are evidently related because one is the cause of the other. Nevertheless, it's true that these are aliens in the sense of being. I already explained it many times. Thus, SBM, symbolic brain me, is the expression of the brain's symbolic self-naming. Since the brain can create symbols, it could also be able to name itself. It's almost a natural consequence of a symbolic exchange with the environment. Meanwhile, the nature of the SPM, as well as that of the SSPM, sleepy symbolic psychemy, and PSPM, parallel symbolic psychemy, is different. First of all, the SPM, symbolic psychemy, is not the self-designation of a real static being, as the case of the SBM is. SPM is the name of a dynamic entity which is symbolic exchange with the participation of SBM1 and SBM2. And there is not one SPM for a given person, but there are as many SPMs, symbolic psychemies, as many symbolic exchanges there are with all the people, the environment. And the SBM, symbolic brain me, is single. It must be surprising that there is no mythical truth about me and no truth about others, because everyone is the infinity of the symbolic me of the psyche. Another thing is that only such a truth is available. The main actor hides behind the curtain of psychosis. When we try to know others, but also to know our own momentary me of the psyche, we only get to know the psychosis manifestation of the real me, which will always remain a mystery to others and ourselves. Therefore, let's remember this when dreaming in a sleep, because then, for a short moment, we can at least feel this mysterious SBM, symbolic brain me, jumping from one psychosis to another. We can feel it. Only and so much. The rest is made up. At this point, it's worth paying attention to another important aspect of a symbolic exchange which takes place without other SBMs of the environment. Let's call it the internal symbolic exchange, ISX. External symbolic exchange will be ESX. Well, in the case of the internal symbolic exchange, ISX, that's the exchange between SBM and SPM, or SBM and PSPM, parallel symbolic psychemy, or SBM and SSPM, sleepy symbolic psychemy, we can observe a significant regularity. The ISX, internal symbolic exchange occurring between SBM and PSPM, parallel symbolic psychemy, as in the case of simultaneous polysymbolicity, so far called as schizophrenia. And this happens, for example, in acute psychosis, this kind of exchange between SBM and PSPM. This exchange is an almost symmetrical inversion of the symbolic exchange taking place in a sleep dream, in the usual cyclic polysymbolicity, typical of all sleep. The formula illustrates it as follows. ISX as simultaneous polysymbolicity equals PSPM plus SBM, and ISX equals SPM plus SBM. And another, ISX, typical for cyclic polysymbolicity, equals SSPM plus SBM, and ISX equals SPM plus SBM. We know all too well how realistic and ultimate it seems to us when we experience in a sleep dream during a symbolic exchange between SBM and SSPMs, sleepy symbolic psychemy. The question whether the visions in the simultaneous psychosis, SP, of PSPM are the same as the visions in the sleep dream of the SSPM. This question is just as much as justified as at this point. Yes, this is the same, with one reservation, namely, the vision of the nocturnal brain psychosis, because that's actually what a sleep dream is, cannot be identical to the vision of parallel psychosis for one simple reason. First, the psychosis of SBM, symbolic brain me at night, cannot be identical to the psychosis of that SBM during the day, because the symbolic activity of the brain at night is different than during the day. Naturally, this activity needs to be more vivid during the day as during the waking time. And at night, it can only be a residual function. Hence, in the symbolic function of the brain at night, there are so many shortcomings, mistakes, and various defective or even absurd symbolic formations. Therefore, it can be said that a symbolic dream is the most flawed symbolic construction of all psychotic constructions of symbolic brain me, which as psychotic are anyway faulty in every aspect. This flaw in the psychotic construction is, however, necessary for the symbolic brain me to be able to undergo the most unreality unnecessary to turn the attention away from the anxiety that is physically as real as possible. In addition, the anxiety is such a difficult opponent because there is no flaw in it that would allow to discredit it easily. The only effective strategy to counter the anxiety must therefore be to shift the SBM, symbolic brain me, beyond the dimension of the anxiety. Such a move beyond the dimension of the anxiety is entering the symbolic dimension.